Hello and welcome once again to Ignite Your Impact. My name is Jen Rhodes. I am sadly by myself again this week. Matt is out traveling for his corporate job. He will be back next week, promise. If you really miss his voice, jump back into last week's episode. I've had so many of you reach out on just how it hit, how it was relatable, made you curious if it was going to be a little controversial. Today, I want to jump in immediately, and I want to start with a question. You know that feeling when the weight of responsibility keeps piling on? When you know you need to serve, but you just don't know how much you have left to give? When you're stretched so thin that taking care of yourself seems like an afterthought? I want to share a story, and I got her permission first. I want to share a story of a client. That's where she found herself recently. And I can relate. And we had a very heartfelt conversation, and I want to use that today to help you hopefully move forward as well. She had been dealing with an ailing parent, and her stress is just through the roof. And in the process, her self-care took a back seat. We're not going to get into the nitty-gritty details because that's her story, not mine to tell. But just know that when you're dealing with a parent that is getting older, I don't know where you are in your season of life. I can relate from my parents taking care of their parents and the stress and the guilt that goes along with that. You just put yourself on the back seat. I can relate when our children were sick. You worry about you later, right? You're only focused on that, and every little thing sends your stress through the roof. This is where she was at. And her self-care just kind of took a back seat. Her anxiety, her exhaustion, her guilt, it all started to kind of add up. And I like to call it the fuck it button. She just kind of started hitting the fuck it button. She worked out when she could. Eating out started happening a little bit more frequently. But more importantly, there was some soothing with alcohol. Not because she needed it, but she felt like it was an easy way to disconnect. Yeah, to detach and take the edge off. And when she finally had a moment to breathe, shame would set in. We talked about it just this week. She said, I've been dreading this meeting because I know I'm going to be in trouble. And I said, okay, well, we'll get to that in a second. She goes, I'm going to completely cut everything out. I'm going to do X amount of steps a day. I'm going to cut my calories to here. I'm going to make sure I overdo it. And her solution was to swing so far in the opposite direction, like ultra strict, and fix herself through rigid discipline. Strict discipline. No drinking, no distractions, just running, eating ridiculously clean, and staying busy helping everyone else. If you're listening to this, dear sweet person, I'm going to tell you again, meditating in the shower is not meditation. It's just a shower with great affirmations. That idea of sitting still honestly causes an actual physiological reaction with her. I can relate. But here's the problem. That kind of massive swing in either direction is not balance. It's another form of avoidance. And when she said, I was worried about coming here because I knew I was going to be in trouble, I stopped her immediately and I said, I will not participate in this dialogue. That's not how we're going to do this today. And if you feel like you need shame, you know I'm not your girl. And I think that took the edge off of the lesson. I will not participate in this massive swing that isn't sustainable. We have to find your balance. You will not sit still long enough to deal with the actual stress. And in doing so, you are sabotaging everything you've worked months for. And that behavior causes even more cortisol. And it hit her hard because it's true. When we don't actually deal with the stress itself, it just finds another way to manifest. Am I right, guys? The answer wasn't in extremes. It was in boundaries. And not just any boundaries, but the kind that protect your peace without leading to chaos, without leading to resentment, without leading to guilt, and without leading to self-destruction. We had a beautiful conversation about that. And she even said, Jen, you're so good with your boundaries, but I have to share. I know where she's coming from. I've been there. I used to have a colleague that would call me every morning at 5 to 5:30 in the morning, waking my husband and I up with some kind of an emergency, something that she was furious about, something that happened that needed addressed right then. And this went on for years. This went on for more than a decade. This is going to take me a second. Years of this. Think about waking up in that kind of a fire drill. And it's important because it's my business. It's very important. But it was enough of this type of behavior that towards the last few years of our tenure, I would have a physical reaction when they called. I would have a full-blown panic attack. This went on for a while, and it completely disabled me. And it took me a very long time to make peace with this and set some boundaries. And I will say that once that boundary was set, I didn't take another call. You get voicemail. That was number one. But I know firsthand how extremely difficult these necessary steps are. So if you've ever felt the weight of responsibilities, if you've ever felt the guilt of setting boundaries, or the exhaustion of swinging between extremes, or if you think I'm going to put you in the no-no box for falling off the wagon, guys, this episode is for you. I want to break it down into 4 steps to help you create and enforce boundaries that actually work. One of the things this client said was, Jen, you've gotten so good with setting boundaries. I have. It's taken me a few years of practice, and I am incredibly healthy now. I was sitting with my bestie last night, having some Mexican food. And she said, you are so healthy with your boundaries. And I said, I am. It's taken practice. And she even said, I don't want to cross the line. I said, you won't, because I'll call you out with love. Like, I'll be like, okay, this is the boundary. And she gets it. She's a business owner too. She's like, thank you. Yes. Let me know where that boundary is. I give when I feel like giving. That's a boundary for me. So I want to break it down in 4 steps. And I want you to be able to take this and practice it. It's not going to happen overnight. But if you start these steps, I promise you, you will feel immensely better about setting and enforcing the boundaries. But before you set a boundary, you need to know what's crossing the line, right? Like, what are your absolutely nots? What are your absolutely not? You do not get to take this piece away from me. This is mine. I protect it. For me, that's time with my kids. It's time with my husband. If I put that boundary up, you are not crossing that line. Fire, flood, blood. That's it. That's the only thing getting through. Fire, flood, blood. Suzanne, if you're listening, this is where fire, flood, blood came from. Is the only reason I am answering at 5:30 in the morning now. Fire, flood, blood. Not a clogged toilet. Not somebody that needs their credit card changed. Fire, flood, blood. You need to identify what's crossing the line. I want you to ask yourself, where am I feeling most depleted? What's consuming my energy the most? Now, for my client, it was the constant phone calls and love to this parent, right? The emotional weight of her parents' care and the way it was like bleeding into every part of her life. Now, if you don't get clear on what's draining you, you're going to be setting random rules that don't actually serve your well-being. And she made the conscious decision, fire, flood, blood. It's very powerful. And there's a little bit of guilt that comes along with this, but I want you to sit with this statement. You might never get an apology for this behavior. You might be surprised when this person might expect an apology from you. You might never get closure. But waiting for that moment is only going to delay your healing. Instead of waiting for someone else to make it right, you have to start healing yourself. If you want some extra steps, my mentor gave me the greatest gift, and it stopped the panic attacks almost instant. If you are interested in that additional tool, I want you to DM me. I'm happy to share it. It's a beautiful, beautiful practice, and you can feel closure without actually hearing or saying, I'm sorry. Okay, number 2, set boundaries that are realistic and sustainable. That's where fire, flood, blood came from. I need people to reach me in an emergency, but you have to understand what that emergency is. This is where we ditch the extreme swings. Boundaries should support you, not suffocate you. And if you're someone who's been coping with stress through habits that don't serve you, trying to go cold turkey on everything at once is going to backfire. In her example, when she swings one way, 6 weeks later, she swings the other. So we have to find balance. You have to find balance. We're going to start today. Instead, choose 1 or 2 key boundaries that will actually make a difference. Hey, sweetie, I can help you when I get home from the gym with whatever task you need at the house. You have my credit card if you need to just go get what you need. Beautiful boundary. Instead of, hey, mom, can you get this at the store? No, I'm going to work out. If you still need me after that workout, then we can go together. Ditch the extremes. Instead of, I'm never drinking again, try, I'm going to set a drink limit for social situations and be intentional when I choose to have a drink. Around the holidays, I do a 1-to-1 ratio. 1 tasty beverage to 1 glass of water. It slows me down enough to where I can still feel social, but I'm not trying to get through events destroying my body. Instead of, I'm working out every day at 5 a.m., 7 days a week. I want you to try, I'm committing to 3 workouts a week, no matter what time, and I've got them scheduled. I've already got the boundary set in my schedule. Boundaries should create freedom, not another cage. Step 3, enforce them without guilt. This is where you may need to practice. Matt was tremendous at helping me practice the language because I had to say it out loud a few times before I could actually say it. Guilt will try to creep in. You will feel selfish. People might push back, and that's okay. My last interaction with this person was enforcing this boundary. But you have to know every time you uphold a boundary, you are reinforcing self-respect. I love you, but I love me more. The people who truly love you and support you will understand. And those who don't, you have your answer. And you can keep enforcing that boundary because they clearly do not care. Again, you have to be prepared for that apology you may never get. But if you don't protect your peace, no one will. No one will. Your job isn't to make everyone else comfortable. It's to make sure that you are living in alignment with what you need and what you serve. I can still serve with every ounce of me. But if I'm pecked so thin, everything falls apart. Step 4, give yourself permission to adjust. It's okay to tweak the boundaries. The last piece of the puzzle is flexibility. Boundaries aren't stone tablets. Now, there are some boundaries that are. Identify your absolutely nots. Right? Absolutely nots are electric fences. Maybe sometimes those are more just like the orange fences at concerts. They can move. And you can move them back and you can move them forward. It's meant to be adjusted as life shifts. Yeah? I made a promise to my son 3 years ago. I will no longer work after 5 p.m. And then we had some things go on that I had to start working at 5 p.m. And I said, buddy, I have to do this. I'm not asking permission. I'm saying I don't have to if you are absolutely against this. And he looked at me and he said, Mom, I work until 6 o'clock every night. Do what makes you happy. Cool. Right? Boundaries can be adjusted. If something isn't working, tweak it. If a certain approach feels too rigid, find a better balance. Right? The goal is never perfection. We've never preached perfection. Ever. It's sustainability. How can you live 365 in this balance? It's balance. So I want to wrap this up. To recap, number 1, identify what's draining you. Number 2, set boundaries that are realistic and sustainable. Number 3, enforce them without guilt. I love you, but I'm not going to do this today. Number 4, give yourself permission to adjust. And remember, the healing starts with you, not with an apology, not with permission, not with someone else realizing they may have hurt you by crossing this line. It starts when you decide you are done carrying the weight of what wasn't yours to bear in the first place. This is not my cross to bear. Oh my God. One of my first boundaries was to a client that, Jen, if you would just do this with me, I would be so consistent. You know what? I am not your fitness Jesus. This is not my cross to bear. If you can't get your ass up, I'm not going to do it with you. And once I said it, she said, you know what? You're right. And every once in a while, I'll still work out with her. But I won't be your fitness Jesus. I'm not going to sacrifice myself. Sorry. Self-respect starts with self-love. So as you move through this, understand that boundaries aren't about shutting people out or becoming a rigid rule machine. They are about making sure you're not pouring from an empty cup. I have so much energy to give to my clients and my family now that I am not pecked to pieces. As you move through this, ask yourself, where do I need better boundaries? And what's one small step I can take today to enforce them? I hope you found so much value in today's episode. I went a little long, but thank you for letting me share my heart and share both stories. If you do have any questions, please feel free to DM me. Make sure you share our podcast wherever you get podcasts, whether it's Insta stories on YouTube or the likes. And as always, guys, we'll talk to you next time, and Matt will be back.